I found the truth hidden in an Easter basket. The birth certificate slipped from the old wicker basket, yellowed and worn. My mother lunged for it, her face contorting with panic. "Ethan, give that to me right now," she shrieked, knocking over her wineglass. Red liquid splashed across the pristine white tablecloth like blood, spreading outward as the room fell silent. My father stood frozen, fork suspended midway to his mouth, while my godmother Katherine averted her eyes, suddenly fascinated by her Easter ham. I clutched the document to my chest, backing away from the table. My fingers trembled against the paper, its edges rough against my skin. 31 years of lies crystallized in that moment. The strange looks from extended family, the missing baby photos, the evasive answers about my birth. The name on the certificate wasn't mine, yet there was my birth date, my time of arrival, and parents I'd never heard of. "What is this?" I demanded, my voice unnaturally steady despite the earthquake inside me. "Who is Edward James Mitchell? And why does he have my birthday?" Mother's mascara had begun to run, black tears tracking down her carefully powdered cheeks. Dad finally set down his fork with deliberate slowness, clearing his throat. "Son, please. This isn't how he wanted." "Wanted what?" I cut him off. "To tell me I'm adopted? Or were you never planning to tell me at all?" The silence that followed was all the confirmation I needed. I'd spent my entire life as Ethan Russell, the beloved only child of Patricia and Richard Russell, award-winning journalist with my father's chin and my mother's eyes, or so everyone said. Now I stood before them a stranger, holding proof that everything had been fabricated. Katherine, my godmother and Mom's oldest friend, finally broke the silence. "Patty, it's time. He deserves to know." "Know what?" I demanded, glancing between them. "Who am I?" Mom's mouth opened and closed, no words emerging. Dad reached for her hand across the table. "We never meant to hurt you," he said softly. "We loved you from the moment we saw you. You've always been our son." I held up the birth certificate. "This says otherwise. I want the truth. All of it. Now." I placed the document on the table between us, a challenge and a dividing line. The cheerful Easter decorations surrounding us, pastel eggs, spring flowers, and ceramic rabbits, now seemed mockingly bright against the darkness spreading through the room. Mother reached for her empty wineglass, then pulled back her hand as if burned. "We should discuss this privately, as a family." "We are discussing it now," I insisted. "And apparently, I don't even know who my family is." Dad sighed, pushing his plate away. "Ethan, please. Your mother is upset." "My mother?" I felt my voice rising. "Which one? The woman on this certificate, or the one who's been lying to me my entire life?" Katherine set down her napkin and stood. "I should go." "No," I said firmly, blocking her path. "You stay? It seems you know something about this too." I turned back to my parents, or whoever they were to me. "I want answers. No more secrets." My father's shoulders slumped. He suddenly looked old, the lines in his face deeper than I'd ever noticed. "We adopted you through a private arrangement. Your biological mother was very young, just 16. She wanted you to have a better life. That doesn't explain why you never told me," I said, my voice catching. "Why the secrecy? Why let me believe I was your biological child?" Mom finally found her voice, though it wavered dangerously. "We were told to protect you. There were complications." "What complications?" I pressed, sensing they were still hiding something crucial. The sound of the doorbell cut through the tension. We all froze, exchanging glances. "Expecting someone?" I asked. Dad checked his watch. "It's probably Daniel. He said he might stop by for dessert." My stomach clenched at the mention of my godfather's name. Daniel Mercer had always been a fixture in my life, my father's college roommate and best friend. He and his wife Sarah had never had children of their own, but had doted on me like a favorite nephew. The timing of his arrival felt strangely significant. Mother stood quickly. "I'll tell him it's not a good time, no," I said firmly. "Let him in. Maybe he'll be more forthcoming with the truth." Dad's eyes widened almost imperceptibly, and I knew instantly that Daniel was part of whatever they were hiding. Mom hesitated, then slowly moved to open the front door. Daniel's booming voice carried through the entryway. "Happy Easter, everyone." I brought Sarah's famous carrot cake. He appeared in the dining room doorway, brandishing a cake box, but his smile vanished as he registered the tension. His eyes fell to the birth certificate on the table, and the color drained from his face. "Oh," was all he said, looking to my father with a question in his eyes. "He found it in the old Easter basket," Dad explained quietly. The one from the attic. Daniel set the cake down carefully, as if handling explosives. I see. I studied his face, searching for clues. What do you know about this, Daniel? He looked at my parents, then back to me. Maybe we should all sit down. I'm tired of being managed, I said, frustration boiling over. Just tell me the truth. Who am I? Daniel pulled out a chair and sank into it heavily. You're exactly who you've always been, Ethan. A wonderful young man who is deeply loved. That's not what I'm asking, and you know it. My godfather nodded slowly. I know. He looked to my parents. Richard, Patty, he has a right to know everything now. Mom began to sob quietly, and Dad put his arm around her shoulders. Daniel turned to me. Your biological mother wasn't just any teenager, Ethan. She was my sister, Jenny. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Your sister? The one who died in the car accident when I was little? I struggled to make sense of this. So you're my uncle? He nodded grimly. Biologically, yes. And my biological father? A shadow crossed Daniel's face. A boy from Jenny's high school. He wasn't in the picture. Did he know about me? Daniel exchanged looks with my father. Yes, but he wanted nothing to do with you. He signed away his rights. Something in their expressions told me there was still more. What aren't you telling me? My mother had stopped crying and was watching me with red-rimmed eyes. Please, Ethan. Some things are better left in the past. That's not your decision to make anymore, I insisted. I'm a grown man. I deserve the whole truth. Daniel rubbed his face wearily. Your biological father came from a powerful family in Denver. When Jenny got pregnant, his parents were concerned about scandal affecting his future. They arranged the private adoption through connections. I felt a chill run through me. You're saying I was essentially sold to protect some rich kid's reputation? No, my father interjected firmly. We wanted you desperately. We've been trying for years to have a child. But why all the secrecy? Why never tell me I was adopted? Daniel looked uncomfortable. The birth father's family demanded complete confidentiality. They didn't want any chance of you trying to contact him later. There were legal documents, NDAs. So my whole life has been a lie because some entitled kid couldn't face the consequences of his actions? My voice rose with indignation. It's more complicated than that, Katherine said softly. Jenny was threatened. They said they'd ruin her life if she ever told anyone who the father was. I stared at her in shock. Threatened? By whom? By the boy's father, Daniel admitted. He was an important man in this city. Still is. A horrible suspicion was forming in my mind. Who was he? Who was my biological father? The four adults exchanged glances, none wanting to be the one to say it. Tell me, I demanded. Daniel finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Carson Bennett. The name hit me like a thunderbolt. Carson Bennett Jr. was the son of Carson Bennett Sr., one of the wealthiest developers in Colorado. The Bennetts owned half of downtown Denver, and Carson Jr. was now a state senator with rumored ambitions for national office. The senator? I said incredulously. Are you telling me that Senator Bennett is my biological father? My father nodded grimly. This is why we kept it from you, Ethan. The Bennetts are powerful people. They made it very clear what would happen if this ever came out. I sank into a chair, trying to process this bombshell. My mind raced with implications, connecting dots from throughout my life. Is that why you were so against me taking that job at the Denver Post 3 years ago? You were afraid I'd somehow cross paths with him. Mom nodded miserably. We were terrified you'd find out this way. Or worse, that they'd realize who you were. But surely they know I exist, I argued. They know Jenny had a baby that was adopted, Daniel explained. But the records were sealed, and they believe you were placed with a family in another state. They have no idea you're here in Denver, that you're my nephew, or that your adoptive parents are friends of mine. I laughed bitterly. So you've all been living in fear of the Bennetts for 31 years? Hiding me in plain sight. We were protecting you, Dad insisted. The senior Bennett made it very clear what would happen if this ever threatened his son's career. My journalistic instincts were firing now, cutting through the personal shock. What exactly did he threaten? Daniel and my father exchanged looks again. He threatened to destroy Jenny's reputation, Daniel said carefully. Said he'd make sure everyone believed she was unstable, that she'd slept around and couldn't know who the father was. And after you were born, the threats extended to you as well. To me? How? Daniel hesitated. He implied that if Jenny ever tried to reclaim you or reveal the truth, they'd make sure you disappeared, that you'd be placed somewhere she would never find you. The cruelty of it stunned me into momentary silence. Then another thought struck. Wait, Jenny died when I was 6. You told me it was a car accident. The heavy silence that followed confirmed my worst fears before anyone spoke. It wasn't an accident, was it? Daniel's face contorted with grief. The official report said she lost control on a mountain road. But Jenny was an excellent driver, and she'd been making noise about wanting to see you. She'd gotten sober, was turning her life around. She told me she was thinking of challenging the adoption. Are you saying the Bennetts had her killed? The words felt surreal leaving my mouth. We don't know for certain, my father said quickly. But the timing was suspicious. And after she died, Katherine received a call. I turned to my godmother, who had been unusually quiet. What kind of call? Katherine's hands trembled as she spoke. A man's voice. I didn't recognize it. He said, the girl's accident should serve as a reminder about keeping secrets. Then he hung up. I felt physically ill. My birth mother possibly murdered, my life built on lies, and somewhere across town was my biological father, a man planning to run for higher office, who had no idea his son was a journalist living in the same city. I need air, I said, standing abruptly. I need to think. I grabbed my jacket and headed for the door, ignoring their calls after me. The cool spring evening enveloped me as I stepped outside, my mind reeling. The life I'd known had shattered, revealing a darker, more complex reality beneath. For hours, I walked the streets of our neighborhood, trying to process everything I'd learned. By the time I returned home, the dining room had been cleared of our abandoned Easter dinner. My parents and their friends were waiting in the living room, faces etched with worry. I have questions, I announced, remaining standing. And I want honest answers. They nodded solemnly. First, do you have any proof of what you've told me? About Bennett, about the threats? Daniel reached for his phone. I have some things at my house. Old letters from Jenny. And there's something else you should know. He hesitated. There's a genetic condition in the Bennett family. A rare form of cardiomyopathy. It's hereditary. My blood ran cold. Are you saying I might have it? You should be tested, Daniel said quietly. Carson Jr. had surgery for it last year. It was kept quiet, but it was in his medical records for an insurance filing. How do you know that? I'm an insurance investigator, Ethan. I have access to certain records. When I saw that filing come across my desk, I was concerned it might affect you. Another revelation, another secret kept from me. What else haven't you told me? Any other bombshells waiting to explode? My mother reached for a box on the coffee table I hadn't noticed before. We kept these hidden. We should have shown you long ago. She handed me the box with trembling hands. Inside were photographs, my birth mother, Jenny, holding me as a newborn. Letters she had written to me that were never sent. A small baby blanket with my original name, Edward, embroidered in one corner. She loved you very much, Daniel said softly. She was just too young, too frightened to stand up to the Bennetts. I held the photos carefully, studying the face of the woman who had given birth to me. I could see traces of myself in her features, the same eyes, the same smile. Why did you keep all this if you never intended to tell me the truth? Dad looked ashamed. We couldn't bear to destroy it. And I think, deep down, we always knew this day might come. I sat in silence for a long moment, absorbing everything. Then I looked up at them. I'm going to need some time, I said finally. This is overwhelming. Of course, Mom said quickly. Whatever you need. I turned to leave, then paused. One more thing. Does Sarah know? About me being Daniel's nephew? Daniel nodded. Yes. She's the only other person who knows. I nodded, processing this final piece of information. I'll call you tomorrow, I said, and left them sitting there as I headed to my car. In the weeks that followed, I underwent testing for the heart condition, negative, thankfully, and dove into research. My journalistic training served me well as I carefully, discreetly investigated the Bennett family and the circumstances of Jenny's death. I took a leave of absence from work, telling my editor I was dealing with a family health crisis, which wasn't entirely untrue. Daniel provided me with everything he had, Jenny's letters, photos, and the few possessions of hers he'd kept. In one photo album, I found pictures of her with a young man I immediately recognized as Carson Bennett Jr. They looked happy, a typical teenage couple at prom. It was difficult to reconcile that smiling boy with the man who had abandoned his child and possibly been complicit in the death of the baby's mother. From public records, I learned that the investigating officer for Jenny's accident had retired to Florida 3 years later, suddenly wealthy enough to buy a beachfront condo. The car she'd been driving had been crushed and disposed of within days, before any independent investigation could be conducted. I also discovered that Carson Bennett Sr. had made a substantial donation to the local police department's retirement fund the same month Jenny died. None of it was conclusive, but the pattern was clear enough. The Bennetts had silenced Jenny, one way or another. Through careful research, I found evidence of other young women who had sudden breakdowns or accidents after associations with the Bennett family. The pattern stretched back decades, with Carson Sr. protecting first himself, then his son, from the consequences of their actions. By the time Easter rolled around again, 1 year after my discovery, I had compiled an extensive dossier. I had witness statements, financial records, and enough circumstantial evidence to warrant a serious investigation into multiple incidents, including Jenny's death. I invited my parents, Daniel and Sarah, and Katherine to another Easter dinner. When they arrived, I had files spread across the dining room table. "What is all this?" Dad asked, looking concerned. I gestured for them to sit. "This is the truth, or as much of it as I could uncover." I explained everything I'd found, watching their expressions shift from concern to shock to outrage. "What are you planning to do with this?" Daniel asked when I finished. I took a deep breath. I've been asking myself that question for months. Part of me wants to publish everything, expose the Bennetts for what they are, and get justice for Jenny and the others. But that could put all of you at risk. My mother reached across the table and took my hand. "We've lived in fear of these people for too long, Ethan. Whatever you decide, we stand with you." Daniel nodded in agreement. "Jenny deserves justice. And so do you." I squeezed Mom's hand. "I've made arrangements with trusted colleagues. If anything happens to me, all of this goes public immediately. But I'm not publishing it yet." "Why not?" Katherine asked. I pulled out one final document from my folder. "Because tomorrow, I have a meeting with Senator Carson Bennett Jr. I've requested an interview about his healthcare initiatives, given his recent personal experience with heart issues." They stared at me in horror. "Ethan, that's too dangerous," Dad protested. "I won't confront him about being my father," I assured them. "Not yet. This is reconnaissance. I want to look him in the eye, see what kind of man he is before I decide how to proceed." Daniel looked grim. "Don't underestimate him, or his father. They're dangerous people." "I know," I said, "but I'm not the voiceless infant they thought they disposed of. I'm not the frightened teenager Jenny was. I'm a journalist with evidence and resources. And I deserve to know the truth, not just about my birth, but about what happened to my mother." Mom wiped away tears. "We're so sorry, Ethan. We thought we were protecting you." "I know that now," I said, softening. "And in many ways, you did. You gave me a good life, a loving home. But now it's time to face the truth, all of us." We shared a subdued Easter meal, the weight of the past and the uncertainty of the future hanging over us. But there was also a strange sense of liberation. The secrets were out, the fears spoken aloud. Whatever came next, we would face it together. The next morning, I prepared for my meeting with Senator Bennett. I packed my recording device, my notepad, and a small photograph of Jenny holding me as a baby, a talisman of sorts, a reminder of why I was doing this. As I headed out the door, my phone rang. It was Daniel. "I want to go with you," he said without preamble. "That's not a good idea," I replied. "He might recognize you." "He never met me," Daniel said. "Jenny kept me away from him." "Please, Ethan. I couldn't protect her. Let me at least try to protect you." I considered for a moment. "All right. Meet me at the coffee shop across from his office in 30 minutes. You can wait there while I'm in the meeting." As I hung up, I caught a glimpse of myself in the hallway mirror. I saw Jenny's eyes looking back at me, filled with determination. I also saw the strength my parents had instilled in me, the resolve that came from being loved and supported despite everything. I was no longer just Ethan Russell, the name on my driver's license. I was also Edward Mitchell, Jenny's son. And for the first time, I was ready to embrace both parts of my identity. Whatever happened in that meeting with Senator Bennett, I would no longer be defined by secrets hidden in Easter baskets. I would define myself through my choices and actions. I would seek the truth, and perhaps, in doing so, I would finally find the justice Jenny deserved. Was I right to pursue the truth about my birth father, even at the risk of danger? Would you confront someone who has gone to such lengths to keep secrets buried?